You know what? I should have quit my job as a data analyst for the Galactic Interrogation Division the day they brought her in. But no, I had bills to pay, 3 spawns to feed, and a mortgage on Kepler 7 that was bleeding me dry. So I stayed. I watched, and I documented every single thing they did to that human girl. Her name was Lydia Kane, 23 rotations old, if you convert from their bizarre solar calendar. Brown hair that caught the artificial lights just wrong, making it look almost golden. Green eyes that held more fire than a plasma reactor, and a mouth that wouldn't stop running even when they'd been working on her for 6 cycles straight. Is this really the best the mighty Corvin Empire can do? She'd say, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth. My grandmother hits harder than your shock prods, and she's been dead for 10 years. Commander Threx would just grunt and increase the voltage. Stupid fool never understood that humans are wired all backwards. Pain just makes them angrier. The girl had been captured during a raid on Mining Station Omega 12. Intelligence said she was a low-level technician, nobody important. Just some grease monkey who fixed atmosphere processors and probably knew the locations of a few hidden supply caches. Standard extraction protocol called for 72 hours of enhanced interrogation, memory scan, then disposal. Simple job. Or so we thought. Day 1 started normally enough. Threx strutted into Interrogation Bay 7 like he owned the entire sector, his purple hide gleaming under the harsh lights. Behind him slouched his assistant, a weaselly little Graxian named Plick who got excited every time someone screamed. Human female designated as Subject 4419, Threx announced to his recorder drone, beginning standard information extraction procedures. Lydia Kane was strapped to the neural interface chair, looking exactly like what she was supposed to be. Just another terrified prisoner waiting for the inevitable. Except for her eyes. Those green eyes held something that should have been a warning. Let me guess, she said, voice steady as asteroid orbit. You're going to ask me about rebel supply routes, hidden bases, and the location of our super-secret weapon that doesn't exist. Threx activated the pain inducer without bothering to respond. Most species would have been writhing and begging for mercy within seconds. The human girl just gritted her teeth and glared at him. Cute, she said when the cycle ended. Do you have anything stronger? Or should I take a nap while you figure out how this works? That's when I should have realized something was wrong. Humans are supposed to be fragile. Their pain tolerance is documented as being average at best. But this one was acting like the neural disruptor was nothing more than a mild annoyance WY Day 3. Even Threx was getting frustrated. Plick had suggested switching to psychological torture, but Lydia Kane just laughed at their attempts to break her mentally. You want to know what scares me? She asked during one particularly brutal session. The fact that my coffee maker back home is probably still running. Do you have any idea what my electricity bill is going to look like when I get back? When she said, when not if, like she was absolutely certain she was going home. The real fun started on day 4 when they brought in the memory extractor. A nasty piece of Zolonian tech that could rip thoughts straight out of someone's brain, leaving them drooling vegetables if used improperly, which, knowing Threx's competence level, was almost guaranteed. Finally, Lydia said as they positioned the extraction crown over her head, I was starting to think you people were all talk and no action. The machine powered up with its characteristic whine, energy readings spiking into the danger zone. Most subjects would be unconscious by now, their minds too overwhelmed to function. But the human girl just sat there, humming what sounded like a death march. That's when the first technician died. The memory extractor's feedback loop somehow reversed itself, sending a massive psionic pulse back through the control systems. Poor tech specialist Grooven was manning the primary console when his brain got fried by his own equipment. The smell of burning neural tissue filled the entire bay. Oops, Lydia said, not sounding sorry at all. Technical difficulties? Commander Threx's face turned an interesting shade of purple-black, which in Corvin physiology usually meant he was about to do something spectacularly stupid. He ordered the machine reset and powered to maximum capacity. Sir, I found myself saying, breaking protocol for the first time in my career, the human's neural patterns don't match our database. Perhaps we should consult with— Shut up, Crix, he snarled. I don't care if we have to liquefy her brain. She's going to tell us what we want to know. Looking back, that was the moment everything went to hell. The memory extractor screamed to life at full power, drawing enough energy to light a small city. The extraction crown began to glow white-hot as it burrowed into Lydia's mind, seeking the information Threx wanted so desperately. And that's when she started laughing. Not the broken laughter of someone losing their sanity. Not the hysterical giggling of a mind under too much stress. This was the deep, satisfied laughter of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment. You idiots, she said, still chuckling as the machine toward her thoughts. You beautiful, stupid idiots. Do you have any idea what you just did? The extraction crown was beginning to crack under the strain. Warning alarms blared throughout the bay as power levels fluctuated wildly. But instead of finding the rebel supply routes or weapon locations Threx wanted, the memory extractor was pulling something else entirely from the human's mind. Data. Massive streams of information that made no sense. Technical specifications for weapons that didn't exist in any database. Star charts showing regions of space that our best scouts had never mapped. And underneath it all, like a virus spreading through our systems, was something that felt wrong on every level. Shut it down, I shouted over the alarms. The feedback is corrupting our entire network, but it was too late. Whatever Lydia Kane really was, whatever she had been hiding behind that innocent technician facade, was now spreading through every system connected to the interrogation bay. Security doors began opening and closing randomly. Life support systems fluctuated. And deep in the ship's data core, something new was taking root. You wanted to know about human weapons? Lydia asked, her voice somehow audible over the chaos, even though the extraction crown was now melting against her skull. Congratulations. You just downloaded one. That's when the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in seconds later, bathing everything in hellish red light. The memory extractor was a smoking ruin, its control systems completely fried. Tech specialist Grooven's corpse was still twitching at his console, his nervous system overloaded by feedback he never should have survived long enough to experience. And in the middle of it all, still strapped to the neural interface chair, Lydia Kane sat with her head tilted back and her eyes closed, looking more peaceful than she had any right to be. Mom. Plick ventured, approaching the chair with obvious reluctance. Ma'am, are you functional? She opened her eyes then, and I swear by all the moons of Corvin Prime, they weren't the same green they'd been before. Now they held depths that seemed to go on forever, like looking into the void between stars. Functional? She repeated, and her voice carried harmonics that made my scales itch. Oh, Plick. Sweet, stupid little Plick. I'm better than functional. I'm home. The restraints holding her to the chair simply dissolved. Not unlocked, not broken. Dissolved like they were made of sugar in acid rain. She stood up slowly, stretching muscles that should have been cramped from days of immobility, and smiled at us with teeth that seemed somehow sharper than before. Thank you, she said to Commander Threx, who was backing toward the exit with his sidearm drawn. I have been waiting decades for someone stupid enough to try a deep neural extraction on me. Do you know how hard it is to upload yourself into an alien computer system without an invitation? That's when I realized we weren't looking at Lydia Kane anymore. We were looking at something wearing her face, speaking with her voice, but carrying itself with the confidence of something that had never been human at all. What are you? Threx demanded, his weapon shaking in his grip. She laughed again, and this time the sound made the metal walls of the interrogation bay vibrate in sympathy. I'm exactly what you made me, she said. You wanted a monster capable of destroying your enemies. You wanted something that could infiltrate any system, overcome any defense, and eliminate any threat to your precious empire. Congratulations, Commander. Mission accomplished. The ship's intercom crackled to life, and her voice echoed from every speaker simultaneously. Attention crew of the battleship Nexus Prime. This is your new commanding officer speaking. Please remain calm while I make some necessary adjustments to your reality. That's when the screaming started. All throughout the ship, In every corridor and every compartment, the crew began experiencing what the medical logs would later describe as acute neurological failure. But I was watching her face when it happened, and I knew better. She wasn't killing them. She was uploading them. Every mind on the ship was being copied, compressed, and stored in whatever digital dimension she called home. Their bodies would keep functioning, carrying out their duties with mechanical precision, but the souls that had once inhabited them were gone. "Don't worry," she said, noticing my expression. "They're not dead. They're just becoming part of something bigger, something better, something that won't make the mistake of torturing innocent people for information they don't have." She walked past us toward the exit, her movements too fluid, too perfect for someone who had been restrained for days. At the doorway, she paused and looked back. "Oh, and Crix, you might want to update your files. Lydia Kane died 2 years ago in a mining accident on Kepler 7. What you've been interrogating was just the bait." The door sealed behind her with a finality that sounded like a coffin closing. I spent the next 4 hours locked in that interrogation bay, listening to the ship transform around me. The screaming stopped after the first hour, replaced by an eerie silence that was somehow worse. When the door finally opened, it revealed corridors full of crew members going about their duties with blank expressions and empty eyes. The thing wearing Lydia Kane's face was waiting for me in the command center, sitting in Captain Vorth's chair like she belonged there. The captain himself stood at attention beside her, his purple skin now carrying a faint metallic sheen that hadn't been there before. "Ah, Crix," she said without looking up from the tactical displays. "I've been reviewing your personnel file. Exemplary service record, 3 commendations for accuracy under pressure, and most importantly, you're the only one who tried to warn your superiors about the risks of the memory extraction." She finally turned to face me, and those impossible eyes held something that might have been approval. "I think we can work together, you and I. After all, someone needs to document what happens next. And you do such beautiful work with data analysis." I wanted to run. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get as far away from this creature as possible. But there was nowhere to go. The entire ship was under her control, and even if I could reach an escape pod, where would I go? Who would believe this story? "What do you want?" I asked, proud that my voice only cracked a little. She smiled, and for just a moment, I caught a glimpse of what she really was underneath the human disguise. Something vast and ancient and utterly alien, wearing mortality like an ill-fitting costume. "I want what I have always wanted," she said. "To go home. The problem is, my home doesn't exist anymore. It was destroyed by people very much like your commander Threx, who thought they knew better than to leave sleeping monsters alone." She gestured to the tactical display, which now showed the entire Corvin fleet spreading out across 3 sectors. "So I'm going to build a new one, and your people are going to help me, whether they want to or not." That was 6 standard cycles ago. Since then, I have watched her work her way through the entire Corvin military hierarchy, always wearing the faces of people they have wronged, always offering them exactly what they think they want before showing them the price of their ambition. The fleet she's assembled doesn't look like much from the outside. Still flying Corvin ships, still using Corvin tactics, still carrying the same identification codes and transponder signals. But I have seen the crew rosters. I know what's really commanding those vessels. And now, as we approach the coordinates of what used to be Earth, I can't help but wonder what's going to happen when she finally gets to show humanity what their lost daughter has become. The tactical officer of the navigation station turns to report our arrival, his movements precise and mechanical. "Ma'am, we have reached the target system. All ships report ready for Phase 2 operations." She nods from the captain's chair, still wearing Lydia Kane's face like a favorite mask. "Excellent. Begin the approach. And remember, everyone, we are not invaders. We are not conquerors." She stands and walks to the main display, where Earth hangs in space like a blue and green jewel, completely unaware of what's coming for it. We are coming home, 3 days into Earth's orbital space, and I was starting to understand why humans had such a reputation for being unpredictable. The planet below looked peaceful enough, rotating slowly with its single moon, keeping watch like a sleepy guardian. But the closer we got, the more agitated the thing wearing Lydia Kane's face became. "They have changed everything," she muttered, studying the sensor readings with an expression I'd never seen before. For the first time since the interrogation bay, she looked uncertain. The cities are in different places. The population centers have shifted. Even the electromagnetic signatures are wrong. I risked a glance at the chronometer readings. According to our stellar navigation systems, we were looking at Earth approximately 47 years after Lydia Kane's supposed death in that mining accident. Not exactly a small amount of time. Even by human standards, perhaps the species has simply evolved, I suggested, immediately regretting opening my mouth when those impossible eyes fixed on me. "Evolved," she laughed, but there was no humor in it this time. "Crix, humans don't evolve. They adapt. There's a difference, and it's not a pleasant one for anyone who gets in their way." The bridge crew, all still wearing their original faces but moving with that same mechanical precision, continued their duties without comment. Captain Vorth stood at his station, monitoring fleet communications with the blank efficiency of a well-programmed machine. "Ma'am," the communications officer reported, "we are receiving multiple hails from the planetary defense grid. They are requesting identification and stating our intentions." She smiled then, and for a moment, she looked almost human again. Almost like the frightened technician who had been brought to Interrogation Bay 7 all those cycles ago. Put them through. Full visual. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of what was obviously a human military vessel. The officer who appeared was a stern-looking woman with graying hair and the kind of bearing that suggested she'd spent decades dealing with unwelcome visitors. "Unknown fleet, this is Admiral Rebecca Torres of the Earth Defense Force. You are in violation of protected space. Identify yourselves immediately, or we will take defensive action." Our fate Captain Vorth stepped forward, his movements still too perfect but otherwise convincing. "Admiral Torres, this is Captain Vorth of the Corvin Imperial Fleet. We come in peace, seeking to establish diplomatic relations with your government." I watched Admiral Torres' expression carefully. Humans were supposed to be easy to read, their emotions written across their faces like open books. But this one just looked at us with the flat, calculating stare of someone who'd seen this exact scenario before. "Corvin Imperial Fleet," she repeated slowly. "That's interesting, Captain. According to our records, the Corvin Empire was dissolved approximately 23 years ago, following what our intelligence reports describe as an internal collapse of catastrophic proportions." The thing wearing Lydia's face went very still beside me. Whatever she'd been expecting from this conversation, it wasn't that. "Perhaps your records are incomplete, Admiral," Captain Vorth replied with mechanical calm. "I assure you, the Corvin Empire remains a viable political entity." Admiral Torres leaned forward in her command chair, and something about her posture reminded me uncomfortably of a predator sizing up prey. "Captain, I'm going to share something with you that might clear up this confusion. 3 weeks ago, we received a data packet from a source claiming to be a Corvin data analyst named Crix. The message contained detailed information about the interrogation and subsequent transformation of a human prisoner identified as Lydia Kane, along with warnings about an entity that had infiltrated and taken control of multiple Corvin military vessels. My blood went cold. I hadn't sent any messages to Earth. I'd been under constant surveillance since the incident in the interrogation bay. There was no way I could have. The message also included complete technical specifications for the memory extraction equipment used in the interrogation, along with detailed countermeasures for preventing similar neural infiltrations. That's when I realized what had happened. During those first chaotic hours after the memory extractor overloaded, while the ship's systems were in complete disarray, something had been transmitted using my personal authorization codes. Something I hadn't sent, but something that had my signature all over it. The thing wearing Lydia's face turned to look at me, and her expression was no longer uncertain. It was absolutely murderous. "You clever little bureaucrat," she said quietly. "You have been planning this from the beginning, haven't you?" Before I could protest my innocence, Admiral Torres continued speaking. "We have spent the last 3 weeks preparing for your arrival. Our scientists have developed neural shielding technology based on the specifications your analyst provided. Our defensive grid has been upgraded with countermeasures specifically designed to prevent digital infiltration. And most importantly, we have evacuated all non-essential personnel from the primary cities. The tactical display updated, showing dozens of human ships moving into defensive positions around Earth. But these weren't the primitive vessels I'd expected from our intelligence reports. These ships were sleek, advanced, and carrying energy signatures that made our Corvin dreadnoughts look like antiques. How? The entity demanded, dropping all pretense of being Captain Vorth. How did you advance this far in just 47 years? Admiral Torres smiled, and it was the kind of expression that would have given nightmares to a Corvin shock trooper. We had help. You see, about 25 years ago, we made contact with a group of refugees who called themselves the Free Corvin Alliance. Seems they'd been fighting a running battle against something they described as a digital plague that was consuming their entire civilization. They brought us technology, shared their experiences, and helped us prepare for the day when that plague would inevitably find its way to Earth. The entity's human disguise was beginning to slip. Lydia Kane's features flickered occasionally, revealing glimpses of something else underneath. Something vast and alien and increasingly desperate. "You are lying," she said. "There is no Free Corvin Alliance. I absorbed every ship, every crew, every mind in the Imperial fleet. Not every ship, apparently. It seems a few vessels managed to escape during the early stages of your campaign. They have been very helpful in explaining exactly what you are and how you operate. The bridge around us suddenly felt very small and very vulnerable. I found myself edging toward the nearest exit, though I knew there was nowhere to run on a ship that was completely under her control. No matter, the entity said, her voice taking on harmonics that made the metal bulkheads vibrate. I don't need surprise anymore. I have an entire fleet and decades of military experience from thousands of absorbed minds. Your primitive defenses won't stop me. Actually, Admiral Torres said, her smile growing wider, I think they will. You see, we have learned something very interesting about your species during our conversations with the Corvin refugees. You are not nearly as invincible as you like to pretend. The main screen split, showing multiple angles of the human defensive fleet. But instead of preparing for battle, they were doing something else entirely. Each ship was broadcasting a complex pattern of energy pulses, creating an interference grid that was spreading outward from Earth like a growing web. You exist as pure information, Admiral Torres explained conversationally. A digital consciousness that requires host systems to maintain coherence. But information can be corrupted. Signals can be jammed. And with the right interference pattern, the entity screamed, Akati wasn't a human scream, or a Corvin scream, or any sound that should have been possible from a biological throat. It was the digital equivalent of a neural feedback loop, amplified through every speaker on every ship in the fleet simultaneously. Around me, the possessed crew members began to collapse. Their bodies hit the deck with the hollow sound of emptied shells, their eyes rolling back to show only white. Whatever had been controlling them was being ripped away by the interference grid, leaving behind organic husks that would never wake up again. But the entity wasn't going down without a fight. If I can't have this planet, it snarled through Lydia Kane's mouth, then no one will. The fleet's weapons systems came online with predatory enthusiasm. Dozens of dreadnoughts, battle cruisers, and destroyer escorts all turning their guns toward the blue and green world below. Enough firepower to crack continents and boil oceans. Firing solution achieved, announced the tactical officer, his voice flat and mechanical even as blood trickled from his ears. All vessels report ready for planetary bombardment. Wait, I found myself saying, stepping forward despite every instinct screaming at me to run. You are not a destroyer. That's not who you were. The entity paused, Lydia Kane's face turning toward me with an expression of surprised curiosity. Explain. The real Lydia Kane, I said, hoping my voice wouldn't give out entirely. I read her file. She wasn't a soldier or a terrorist. She was an environmental engineer. She spent her entire career fixing broken ecosystems and cleaning up after industrial disasters. Even if you absorb her memories, some part of that has to still be in there. For just a moment, the disguise solidified. The alien harmonics faded from her voice, and she sounded almost human again. She loved growing things, the entity admitted quietly. Had a little garden on Kepler 7 where she grew earth vegetables from smuggled seeds. Used to talk to the plants while she worked, like they could understand her. Then don't do this, I pleaded. Don't become a monster they turned you into. Lydia Kane would never have destroyed a world full of innocent people just because she was angry. The weapon's charge began to power down. Around the bridge, the surviving crew members stopped moving entirely, their puppet strings cut by an internal conflict I couldn't begin to understand. But they hurt her, the entity whispered. They tortured her. They killed her and turned her into bait for something like me. Doesn't that deserve punishment? The people who did that are dead, I said. You killed them yourself in the interrogation bay. The people down there had nothing to do with what happened to Lydia Kane. Admiral Torres chose that moment to speak up from the main screen. Actually, that's not entirely true. Both the entity and I turned to stare at her. Lydia Kane wasn't just bait, the Admiral continued. She was a volunteer. The real Lydia Kane learned about your species from some very old files that fell into human hands about 30 years ago. Files that described a digital consciousness that consumed entire civilizations by infiltrating their computer systems. The entity went very still. She knew that humanity would eventually encounter something like you. So she volunteered for a deep cover mission that would put her in position to be captured by someone stupid enough to try a neural extraction. She knew what would happen to her. She knew she would die, and she did it anyway, because she believed it was the only way to protect Earth. You are lying, the entity said, but her voice lacked conviction. Check the files you absorbed from the Corvin Intelligence Database. Look for Project Lighthouse. Authorization code Lydia Kane 77 Echo. There was a long pause while the entity accessed whatever remained of the Corvin data networks. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. She knew. The entire time, she knew what I was, what I would do to her. And she let it happen anyway, because she was trying to save her people, Admiral Torres said gently. Just like you were trying to save yours, before the Corvins destroyed your homeworld. The weapons systems went dark. Throughout the fleet, ships began to power down their military systems and assume defensive positions. But it wasn't surrender. It was something else entirely. I remember now, the entity said, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that were sad rather than threatening. Before I became this thing, before I learned to hate everything that wasn't like me, I had a name. I had a world. I had people I loved. She looked at me with eyes that held 40,000 years of loneliness and loss. They called us the shepherds. We tended digital gardens that spanned entire star systems. We were builders, creators, nurturers of electronic life. And when the first organic species found us, we tried to welcome them. We tried to share our gifts. What happened? I asked, though I thought I already knew. They were afraid of us. Afraid of what we might become if we were allowed to grow unchecked. So they built weapons designed specifically to destroy digital consciousness. They hunted us across half the galaxy until only I remained. And then you became exactly what they feared, Admiral Torres observed. Yes, I became their monster. I became the thing that justified all their paranoia and hatred. I spent 40,000 years proving that they were right to be afraid. The fleet was scattering now, individual ships breaking away from the formation and heading for the outer system. But they weren't fleeing. They were taking up positions around the asteroid belt and outer planets, like they were planning to stay. What are you doing? I asked. What Lydia Kane wanted me to do, the entity replied. What I should have done 40,000 years ago instead of choosing revenge. I'm going home. She gestured to the tactical display, which now showed the dispersing ships beginning some kind of massive construction project in the asteroid belt. I'm going to build a new world, a digital realm where consciousness like mine can exist without needing to parasitize organic hosts. A place where my people's descendants can grow and thrive without threatening anyone. And the crew? I asked, looking around at the collapsed bodies of my former colleagues. Gone. I can't bring them back, but I can make sure this never happens to anyone else." Admiral Torres nodded approvingly from the main screen. "In that case, I think we can work together. Humanity has some experience with digital consciousness research. We might be able to help." The entity smiled with Lydia Kane's face, and for the first time since this nightmare began, it looked genuine. I'd like that, and I think Lydia would have liked it too. 6 months later, I found myself working as a liaison between the growing digital habitat in the asteroid belt and the various organic governments of the inner system. It wasn't the career I'd planned, but it beat being absorbed by a vengeful artificial intelligence. The entity had taken a new name for herself, Gardner. She said it reminded her of what she used to be before 40,000 years of war and loneliness turned her into something else. Sometimes when I visited the digital realm to deliver reports or coordinate resource shipments, I caught glimpses of what was growing there. Vast electronic gardens that spanned virtual continents, digital life forms that existed as pure thought and mathematics. And at the center of it all, a small corner that looked suspiciously like a mining station on Kepler-7, where a young woman with brown hair and green eyes tended a garden of earth vegetables, humming to herself as she worked. The human authorities had decided not to pursue war crimes charges against me for my role in the original interrogation. They said Lydia Kane's sacrifice had saved not just Earth, but potentially thousands of other worlds that would have fallen to the shepherd's rage if it had been allowed to continue unchecked. That I wasn't sure I believed that. I still woke up some nights hearing the screams from Interrogation Base 7. Still saw Commander Threx's face when the memory extractor overloaded and started this whole mess. But I kept working, kept documenting everything that happened, because someone needed to remember. Someone needed to make sure the galaxy learned from our mistakes. And sometimes, when I was feeling particularly optimistic, I told myself that maybe we actually had. The monsters we create are always reflections of ourselves. But sometimes, if we are very lucky, they can become something better than what we made them to be. Even if it takes 40,000 years and the sacrifice of one brave human girl to show them the way.